Misa here with a story that's very close and personal to me. One day, I was walking around as a child, and there was a man who was known as a detention officer in a nearby town of only 1,000 people. This detention officer, however, was a cannibal and a criminal, and he was well known for being a very disgusting criminal. And word on the street was he wanted to talk to me, and I really wasn't interested in talking to him. Several grown men had approached me and told me that he needed to talk to me and it was important because he was a police officer and he could give me very important information. I thought for a moment, that doesn't seem right. And it was one day when I was wandering out in public, and this man had approached me and he said, "I sent a few men to talk to you, and I had explained that I'm a police officer. Did you hear what I had to say? I have things to say to you." When I spoke to this man, he had a very demented smile from what I could remember, and I felt very weird. He had bright blue eyes, brown hair, and a weird face that almost looked like he had stab injuries that had reconstruction surgery covering them. He was a very weird and scary looking man. And the more I looked at him, he looked like he was a beaten down old dog to whom didn't want to get up and talk even. He looked like a person who was desperate to abuse someone, and I think he saw that I was a child and wanted to abuse me. I said, "Yes, I saw the men. What do you want?" He essentially began to talk to me, and the first thing he had to say was that he was my grandfather. However, this is not true. Immediately, I looked at him with this weird look and felt vomitous. The first thing I had to say was, "I don't even know you." The person said, "I know. It's because your father wants to keep you from me. And your mother is dead." And he had this weird theatric about his voice, as what I noticed the first time I even heard it. The moment he began to frantically speak to me, I remember looking over the side and seeing a police car whir up. And when the police car had arrived, several policemen had gotten out and escorted that man into the back of their car. It turned out he was a detention officer for the Deer Lodge prison. However, that being said, it doesn't change that he's a homicidal deranged maniac. And what startled me the most was how the police had just escorted him back to his household and not into prison or into an asylum. It was a very weird encounter. When I talked to several of my family about it later, I sat down with my dad, and he told me those policemen who came and picked you up were because I called into the police, and what they felt best to do was to take him back to the house away from you as far as they could. And that man is an individual to whom is a rapist, and they were trying to rape you. I tilted my head and was confused. It was very disgusting. He had pulled me in close to whisper in my ear, and he said, "And that man's a cannibal. We've seen him do some very gruesome things to people, and he's not quite the person you'd want to talk to. And I want to be really quiet about this so our family doesn't hear that you even spoke to him because it will startle them." I said, "That doesn't seem right. We should keep them aware so that they know the danger out there, and alert the police more so that he's arrested. Isn't there evidence that he's a cannibal?" "Yes, he was in prison for a time. Someone broke him out of prison, and there's a giant investigation going on." At this time, I was only a child, but it wasn't until years later that I had joined a group of activists when I had met that man again. And at that time, I was still only a child, but just years later. And he had come up to me, and I had amnesia. It was a blur of moments, truly. I had gone through so much at that time. To be honest, I had troubles trying to remember where I was born, when I was born, and there was a moment where I even forgot what country I was in. I was confused and didn't know where my family was, and this man had approached me once again. And he says, "Do you know me?" And I said, "No, who are you?" And he says, "I'm a police officer and a prison guard. Do you know me?" "Yes, I think I do know you." What do you want? I want to take you home, dear. I'm your grandfather. It was in 2020 when I had attempted suicide 3 times. My daughter was living in the same house as me. She was forced into a sex change when she was a child. And it's a very scary circumstance of organ harvesting. When this had happened, this deranged lunatic was beaten up several times by my family, and there was extreme military work that had been conducted on the property by my family. A whole group of my family, SWAT and other individuals had come in and set up a scene. A whole group of our military, our family, had brought down a scene of espionage over this man's head for my daughter and I. A whole group of military, my family, brought down a scene of espionage, which lasted over 20 years, facing this deranged lunatic over his head. They had the property bomb squatted, and they had given me military documents proving that I was a child soldier. They even had several meetings with me in locations that I cannot talk about. My daughter had worked alongside me in my own property, where we had named the street after one of my most intelligent aliases, Lerin. What many people didn't know about this property, however, was how it came about. My husband was fleeing Wisconsin from a man to whom had kidnapped him and was pretending to be his father. And when this had happened, he had stolen money that essentially was being used from him being human trafficked as a unwilling prostitute, and he took the thousands of dollars that was generated to Montana and created this household in Lewis and Clark Valley. And when this had happened, the stalker had followed him to Montana and raped him in the household, and several of our family members had fought for years to get the house back until finally the man who was a cannibal stalker had stalked him to the point that he had just let the man take the house, and he was living in a completely different house at this time. Now, what was very disturbed for us is how the justice system did not arrest this man. And Lerin Drive became a huge activistic approach to saying, how dare you stand against the victims of these crimes? Why does it feel when I call the authorities that I have to deal with some punitive shit-eater crying about their rights while I'm sitting here and telling you what my rights are in the law book? And when this had happened, we saw a revolutionary change. The anonymous community had flourished around the globe and became one of the most well-known group of people to whom would literally take people out of prison systems that weren't supposed to be there with legal actions, meaning they would go to court and they would stomp up to the detention centers and they would make sure with a peaceful protest that the people to whom didn't deserve to be there would be taken out. And these criminals would behave with sinful behavior and exchange vile criminal assets such as prostitution, human trafficking, etc. for means to get out. And the justice system would just overlook this and look away. Absolute bullshit. And so I'm proud to announce that Lerin Drive is going to be a beautiful memorial for the veterans and be made into a museum of how much we did work and how much we have continued to still stand against this bigotry. We became the mustard seed to which moved mountains here in Montana, and the Rocky Mountains never scared us. We kept ourselves going when these abusers said we would never continue going. And if we stumbled, we got back up and walked even fiercer. And so I cannot help but want to tell the story of this property because this house is a very special house that I was allowed to raise my daughter in, who is my hero.